daanan natin to sa pagpunta dun sa main destination natin. So, puntahan na lang din natin. So, those are the side trips. A domestic trip is one with the main destination within the country of residence of the visitor. An inbound or outbound trip is one with the main destination outside the country of residence of the visitor. So, we will discuss further dun sa susunod nating discussion or susunod na lesson after the conceptual background of the UNWTO's tourism definition. An outbound tourism trip might include visits to places within the country of residence, in the same way as a domestic trip might include visits outside the country of residence of the visitor. So an inbound trip, however, includes only visits within the country of reference. So, ito na yung tinatawag natin, the last one, tourism and being employed by a resident entity in the country visited. Any trip by a traveler whose main purpose is to be employed by a resident entity in the country visited and receive compensation for the labor input provided should not be considered as a tourism trip. Kasi nga po, if you go to a place to earn money, you are actually causing leakage to their multiplier effect. You are not injecting money to their economy, but you are causing leakage to their economy. Even though it is outside his or her usual environment and for less than 12 months, nevertheless, if being employed and the payment received are only incidental, ibig sabihin, pag pumunta ka doon, hindi mo talaga intensyon na kumita or nagbigay lang sila ng pera sa'yo, pero the main purpose na pumunta ka doon is hindi kumita, the traveler would still be a visitor. And the trip would still qualify as a tourism trip. So that's it for the conceptual background. Now, let's go to the forms of tourism. So the first one is domestic tourism. This comprises the activities of a resident visitor within the country of reference, either as part of a domestic trip or part of an outbound tourism trip. So ang domestic tourism, for example, this is your place. Ang domestic tourism na tinatawag natin is you only travel within one place or within one country. So that is what we call tourism trip. Pasensya na dito sa drawing ko. So the term domestic has different connotations in the context of tourism and the national accounts. In tourism, domestic retains its original marketing connotation, and that is, it refers to the activities of resident visitors within the country of reference. However, when we will be talking about domestic in the view of national accounts, domestic refers, domestic refers to the activities of resident consumers irrespective of the location of that activity. So, irrespective of the location of that activity, it doesn't have any geographical aspect. So, in the national accounts context again, domestic tourism thus corresponds to what is called national tourism in tourism statistics. So that's the first form of tourism. Ay, wala yung picture. Next, inbound tourism. This comprises the activities of non-resident visitor within the country of reference or an inbound tourism trip. So, for example, this is your country. Ang inbound trip na tinatawag natin, this is your country. This is the country of the tourist. So, this is the tourist, for example. Ang inbound trip na tinatawag natin is from the country of the tourist going inside your country. So, that is inbound tourism. Activities of non-resident visitor. Hindi sila residente ng country mo, and they are doing tourism activities. So that is what we call inbound tourism. Next naman for outbound tourism. Outbound tourism, basahin nyo na lang yung definition. I will just give you the illustration. So again, let's use two countries. This is your country, and this is another country. So the tourist comes from your country, going outside, going to another country. So that is outbound. Outbound palabas. Inbound papasok. So I hope you understood the difference of inbound and outbound. So those are the three major forms of tourism: domestic tourism, inbound tourism, and outbound tourism. Now let's go to the hybrid type of or forms of tourism. So for internal tourism, this comprises domestic tourism. This comprises domestic tourism plus inbound tourism. So, yung mga visitors na nagta-travel within the country at yung mga foreigners na nagta-travel papunta sa country mo, so that is internal tourism. National tourism naman is the sum or it's the combination of domestic and outbound tourism. So ang main or the same aspect ng domestic and outbound tourism is that ang visitor or ang tourist ng domestic tourism at ang tourist ng outbound tourism ay parehas ng nationality or citizenship. So, for example, sa point of view ng mga Pilipino, ang turista ng domestic tourism ay Pilipino, ang turista ng outbound tourism ay Pilipino din. So, that's national tourism. And the last one, international tourism. So, this is that combination of inbound, yung mga foreigner na papasok sa Philippines, and outbound, yung mga Pilipino na pupunta sa ibang foreign country for tourism activities. So that is the forms of tourism. So the last part of our discussion is about the international and domestic tourism. So first, let's talk about international visitors first. International travel consists of both inbound and outbound travel, which is na-discuss natin from the previous slide, and refers to situation in which the country of residence of the traveler is different from the country or countries visited. So, hindi doon nakatira. Hindi, yung visitor is hindi yun yung country niya. Yung pupuntahan niya, hindi yun yung country niya. So, an international traveler qualifies as an international visitor with respect to the country of reference if, first, he or she is on a tourism trip and not to have or not to work or not to be compensated in that certain destination. B, he or she is non-resident traveling in the country of reference or a resident traveling outside of it. Ma'am, paano po yung mga Canadian citizen na mga Pilipino na nagta-travel lang dito for 6 months? I am sorry, they are not accounted or they do not qualify as international traveler in the context of tourism. Why? Because as long as they hold a Philippine passport, they will not be counted as visitors. Kasi may pinapa-fill upan sa airports natin. So next, international visitors are characterized by the main purpose of their trip, whereas other international travelers are characterized by the reason for which they are excluded from visitors. So hindi sila kina-qualify na visitor, even if they qualify on these two, still they cannot be qualified as visitor first if they are being in an employer-employee relationship doon sa place na yoon. Next, if they are being within the usual environment or palagi naman silang pumupunta dito sa Pilipinas, so they will not be qualified as international visitors. Next, domestic visitors. From the perspective of the country of reference, a domestic traveler qualifies as a domestic visitor if, again, he or she is on a tourism trip, and second, he or she is a resident traveling in the country of residence. Ibig sabihin, residente siya ng country na yon at doon lang din siya nagte-travel. So that is what we call domestic visitors. So that's it. Please be reminded of your tasks and the deadline, of course. Thank you for listening, and I hope you were able to grasp important principles, theories, and important ideas from this discussion. Thank you, and God bless.